50 years after this airman disappeared in Vietnam, investigators made an astonishing discovery. In 1968, three A-6 Intruder planes took off from the USS Enterprise for a mission over Vietnam. For the two-man crew of one of those aircraft, the mission would not turn out well. Still, it would be more than 50 years before anyone knew the story of navigator and bombardier Lieutenant Richard C. Lannom. Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. When Lannom and Shurik disappeared in March 1968, the U.S. was well and truly embroiled in the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese Communists, with the support of their Chinese allies, called the conflict the Resistance War against America. In fact, the fighting in Vietnam is seen by many as part of the Cold War, the decades-long dispute that pitched America and her allies against communist countries led by the Soviet Union. A turning point in the war came in January 1968, when the North Vietnamese launched a massive assault, the Tet Offensive. This involved over 8,500 North Vietnamese fighters attacking more than 100 South Vietnamese cities. Fighters even attacked the American embassy in the South Vietnamese capital, Saigon. Many towns fell to the Communists, and two more large-scale attacks quickly followed. After the Tet Offensive in South Vietnam on January 30th, the Enterprise resumed its journey to the Tonkin Gulf on February 16th. Her specific destination was Yankee Station, a mustering point at sea for U.S. naval forces, some 90 miles off the North Vietnamese coast. Enterprise arrived at Yankee Station on February 21st, and airborne combat missions commenced the very next day. On the 23rd, despite bad monsoon weather, Attack Squadron 35's A-6 Intruders headed out on their first mission of the deployment. They attacked the North Vietnamese port at Hanoi, the country's capital city. Attack Squadron 35 was Lannom and Shurik's unit, and this first mission to Hanoi was judged a success. Concerning these types of A-6 missions, it's worth noting the words of Admiral William F. Bringle, the Vice Commander of the 7th Fleet, quoted on the POW Network website. They gave him a flavor of what men like Shurik and Lannom were up against. Admiral Bringle said, "The low-level night missions flown by the A-6 over Hanoi and Haiphong were among the most demanding we've ever asked our air crews to fly. Fortunately, there's an abundance of talent, courage, and aggressive leadership in these A-6 squadrons." The missions Lannom and Shurik undertook then were no cakewalk, and the A-6 crews continued to fly in the heavy rains and stormy weather that characterized the Northeast Asian monsoon season. Indeed, it's been said that the Airmen actively welcomed these bad conditions, which persisted through February and into March. Their aircraft were specially designed to cope with the conditions, and the bad weather offered the planes a cloak of concealment from the enemy. But let's return to March 1st, 1968. Three A-6s took off from the Enterprise at 6 p.m. that day. The lead aircraft, number 1, was crewed by pilot and squadron commander Glenn Coleman. Navigating was Johnny Griffin. Lieutenant Commander Greg Young was flying the second plane, with Lieutenant Bill Siegel as navigator, and Lannom and Shurik were in plane number 3. Coleman's plane was to attack the strategically important Tan Hoi Bridge. Planes 2 and 3, however, were headed for the Cam Pha Barracks, about 90 miles from Hanoi. After the 3 planes had taken off from the Enterprise, they met up at the preordained point just off the North Vietnamese shores. After final weapons and communications checks, it was time to fly to their targets. Coleman headed west for the seemingly indestructible bridge, while the other 2 planes, led by Young, set a course northwards for Cam Pha. The approach to this target was fraught with difficulty. The seas were dotted with small islands by the hundred, many with jagged rock formations reaching to the sky. This made low-altitude flying particularly perilous. And the mission was made no easier by the fact that there was a heavy concentration of North Vietnamese anti-aircraft defenses in the very area the crews were flying into at low altitude. Young sped in for his attack at 1,500 feet. Shurik came on the radio to say he was about to attack as well. Young's plane then dropped its bombs. Meanwhile, Lannom's plane turned its identification transmitter off. This was presumably to avoid detection by North Vietnamese anti-aircraft batteries. The plane also disappeared from radar as it was flying at the low altitude of 2,500 feet. For all intents and purposes, the A-6 was now undetectable except by human eyes. The 3 planes had a pre-arranged rendezvous point where they were to meet after completing their mission. That location was intended for a situation when one or more of the planes had lost radio contact and sustained damage. 2 of the planes arrived on schedule. There was no sign of Lannom and Shurek's aircraft. The 2 crews that made it to the rendezvous searched the area for the missing craft, but found nothing. Then they tried to raise their buddies on radio. When there was no response, they alerted search and rescue. They too drew a blank, and no emergency signals from the intruder were detected, nor did they spot any wreckage. The mystery was complete. It seemed that Lannom and Shurek had disappeared into thin air. The 2 A-6s waited as long as they could in the hope that Lannom and Shurek would show up, but eventually, with fuel running low, they had no choice but to return to the Enterprise. As they made their way back to the carrier, they radioed the ship to report their comrades missing. The next group of planes due to make an attack from the aircraft carrier then jettisoned their bombs and instead went to search for the missing A-6. Lannom and Shurek's Navy comrades now made a thorough search for the pair. The Intruder Association website later carried an interview with Bob Benjamin, who had been a member of Attack Squadron 35 at the same time as the 2 missing men, and he'd been flying in one of the planes that ditched their bombs to help them search. "As I remember, it was a clear but dark night," Benjamin explained. "If there was a fire on the ground from the wreckage, we would have been able to see it. But we didn't. We found neither fire nor a survival radio signal. We searched the area near Cam Pha, the island south, west, and east of Cam Pha, and even went north as far as the Chinese border, looking for any sign of the wreckage. Nothing." Ominously, Benjamin also added, Cam Pha on a dark night was almost impossible to find on radar. It was a place that was tailor-made to get disoriented. The limestone formations and the mountains behind Cam Pha made low-level flying deadly. And as a result of the fruitless search, Lannom and Shurek were declared missing in action. The naval authorities then announced that Shurek and Lannom's plane must have gone down about 29 miles from Cam Pha in the Bay of Tonkin. But the truth was that nobody really knew where the plane had ditched or even crashed. Perhaps the men had ejected near their target before being captured by the communists, but it was all speculation. Nobody knew for sure whether Lannom and Shurek were dead or alive, but there was still the possibility that the pair had survived and were being held in a North Vietnamese POW camp somewhere. This, after all, had been the fate of many other U.S. airmen, but this too turned out to be a blind alley. After the U.S. forces withdrew from Vietnam in 1973, just under 600 American prisoners of war were released. Sadly, neither Lannom nor Shurek were among them, and even now there are still men that haven't been accounted for. According to the Defense POW MIA accounting agency, in fact, 1,592 Americans remain missing as of December 2018. The years passed and the families of Lannom and Shurek were left in limbo, not knowing what had happened to their loved ones. In 1978, however, the Navy declared that Shurek was no longer missing in action. Instead, he was now presumed dead. But for both families, there was still no grave to grieve over. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspirational stories.